All right, everybody. I'm out of the meth end of town for my weekly break from solitary confinement. Out here in the north end of town at Trent Radio with Rochelle.
Hey.
And Rochelle, do you want to dip?
No, I'm good. Thanks.
No, you're good. Okay, I gotta ask.
I just got some fresh gum in the mouth.
I wanted to talk to Rochelle because Rochelle does a very, very important thing in our community that I don't often go to due to social anxiety, but not that the food isn't great. I actually have been. Your food is amazing, Rochelle. Amazing. It's always vegan, like nut free, like it's safe. It's like safe for everybody. It seems. But yeah. Could you tell us about Food Not Bombs, Rochelle?
Sure. So, Food Not Bombs is a movement that exists across the world. And basically, it's a really simple concept that gets taken up by people and maneuvered in slightly different ways depending on what the needs of a community are. So, the basic idea behind it is that we reclaim food that's being wasted, we cook it up together, and do a bunch of like knowledge and skill sharing while cooking. And then the third basic idea is that it gets served up in a very public place to anyone whosoever chooses to access that food, right? So Food Not Bombs really attempts to pull us away from the charity model, a dynamic that constantly says, there's people on this side of the soup line and people on this side of the soup line. This idea that I think is pretty classist and is pretty poor bashing, that says that those who are without are somehow, needing to be put in a very separate place from those who, out of the magnanimity of their heart and, the kindness of their spirit, can give and give and give and give. So at Food Not Bombs, what we try to do is create an opportunity for those who are hungry, for those who are either hungry for food itself or those who are hungry for sharing food, but also looking for community to connect with, to be the ones who actually make the food, serve the food, share the food, and promote the idea to anyone and everyone who happens to come in, that those who come and eat can be the same people who come back and do dishes that night or can help us by cooking the feast the next week, right? And we do things this way for a whole bunch of different reasons. One is that we absolutely want to feed people. We want people to have the nourishment that they need. But we also want to empower people, right? Because just giving people a bowl of something doesn't really change the dynamic. And unfortunately, we live in a culture that is really class-based. And we pretend that it isn't. But it ever so much is. And people experience power and privilege in different ways depending on what their social economic class is. And there's a direct correlation between people who are low income and psychologies of lacking, of low self-esteem, et cetera, not because low income people inherently should have low self-esteem, but because systemic classism tells people that they don't have the skills, that if they were smarter, if they had more talent, if they had more beauty, if they had all these other things, then they wouldn't be so low income, and they wouldn't be hungry, and they wouldn't need something like a community program where they're eating with people in a park, right? What we're trying to do is remind people that that we all eat, that this is actually one of the universal gatherers that creates a sense of connection between all human beings, regardless of their class or their background otherwise, and that that by actually feeding ourselves, we can step into a place of feeling very, very differently about power in our day-to-day lives, right? And so we really try to work from a space that acknowledges that that the art of cooking, although we try to make the most delicious, nutritious things we possibly can, is really not all that specialized. We try to empower as many people as possible in the kitchen to understand that by doing very, very simple things, lovingly and creatively, you can make totally delicious things that everybody can enjoy. And so we do cook a meal that is vegan, that is nut-free, and almost always we have a majority of our dishes are gluten-free. So there might be some bread or this or that, but if you're gluten-free, if you're nut-free, if you eat as a vegan or otherwise have a lot of special diet needs, you should be able to access the food that we're putting on the table. And if none of those sound like the kind of diet that you're looking for, we are an anti-poverty project, right? So as much as we might love our kale salads and the rest of it, we're really prudent about trying to make sure that we always have like some mashed potatoes or some like simple roasted carrots and some food that somebody who perhaps is a bit more of a meat and potato eater could still enjoy, because we really want people to be well fed, but also to feel a sense of inclusivity. And we want to break down the barriers that have so long been in place. It says these people over here, these people over here, right? So at our meals, you'll find people from all kinds of different class backgrounds. You'll find people who are there for all kinds of different reasons. And we really believe that true community isn't like who you want to have be at the table. True community is everybody who happens to live in a particular place, right? So it's not a perfect art. We try really hard to create the safest space possible. We can't pretend away all the power dynamics that happen, but Food Not Bomb strives very hard to be a space that acknowledges that we work from Indigenous land, to be a space that acknowledges that there's barriers galore for people who are otherwise marginalized, people of color, people with disabilities, people who are queer, people who identify as trans. All these things make it really hard to actually connect and be a space that's safe for people. So Food Not Bombs is sort of a rarity in our community that has been a space that bridges a lot of other communities. It's an access point for new folks coming to town who are looking for a place to meet other folks who are politicized in all kinds of different ways. So we try to taste our way through a long season of delicious connections and community, as well as delicious dishes and fine soups along the way.
That's amazing, Michelle.
Cheers.
And it's good that it's so inclusive. You know, as someone, I am 100% dependent on food banks for my groceries.
So many people are.
And none of them are wheelchair accessible.
Yeah.
You can only go to them once a month.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And like most of my life, I've been a vegetarian or a vegan, right? Yeah. And you know, when you go to the food bank and you tell them, yeah, I'm a vegan, they say, oh, okay. So then you get your bag of stuff, and like there's a can of tuna fish and a bag of milk and like a box of KD. But you know, it's like, it's what you got, right? So you kind of gotta, you know, if I had it my way, I'd live very differently. But it's very, very cool and a very, very important part of our community here. But where does it happen, Rochelle? How do you do it?
The Food Not Bombs kitchen has moved around a whole bunch of places over the years. We've cooked in community centers. We've cooked in a lot of people's homes, from very tiny kitchens to fairly large kitchens. Right now, we're super duper blessed to have entered into a relationship with Emmanuel Church North, which is the one up on Reed Street, I believe. And it is a space that has been so generous to the Food Not Bombs movement. Although there's been talk in the past years of, you know, us using such a space, getting in and out and having access and being able to do it on holidays and all that jazz has just been kind of a nightmare. And this space has just truly dedicated themselves to the project that we're doing, and have given us keys and an open door to use the space in the timelines that we need, which means that we can go back and do dishes at like 10 o'clock on Christmas night, right? So this year, both Christmas Day and New Year's Day happen to fall on a Monday. And rain, sleet, snow, whatever the case, we never ever miss a meal. We're just past the point of celebrating 12 years as a Food Not Bombs movement here in Peterborough.
It's incredible.
Which is pretty amazing. We've never, ever missed a Monday. There's been a couple that have been a little bit late, but they've never, ever not been wholesome and fulsome and ready for anyone who wanted to share.
And it's in Victoria Park?
So it's in Confederation Park.
Oh, Confederation Park.
For many, many long years, Food Not Bombs actually served out of the front lobby of City Hall. And then we served from the lawn of City Hall. And for the last number of years, we have been in Confederation Park, which is across the street from City Hall, and is a space that those who eat with us enjoy a lot more. And it still provides us the opportunity when issues around poverty are on the agenda, when issues around gentrification, around social space, inclusion, mental health, addictions, all these things, still allows us to mobilize from the meal and bring people up to City Hall and make sure that people keep poverty on the agenda, which is part of what we started with all this from, right? But it's in a park that is firmly dedicated to being about war and remembrance. And by formal law, there's not really supposed to be anything that happens in Confederation Park that doesn't have to do with like war and peace, right? This is where our war monument and whatnot are. And so it's kind of a suitable place for a project called Food Not Bombs anyways, because a big part of what that name means is that we believe that the cultures that we live in are very much skewed towards empowering a death culture, empowering things that remove autonomy, remove empowerment, and we want to move towards a reality where we are not focused on the war. We want to actually establish, what good community living could look like now, right? So Food Not Bombs exists not only as a project to give people food and to create community space, but it is an idea, a very, very simple idea, which is like if we didn't spend all of our money on stuff that kills people and creates a lot of destruction and death, and we did spend some of our community money on things like actually putting in formal budgets, feeding people, making sure they had housing and the rest of it, our communities would suck a lot less, right? So we cook every Monday night, Monday afternoon rather, at 3:30 at Emmanuel Church. Everybody is invited to come out and cook. It doesn't matter if you've ever been in a kitchen before. We always have a couple bottom liners who will walk you through. And if you're somebody who, has no cooking experience, we'll just get you chopping something. And if you're somebody who has like a favorite chili in mind and you're like, oh my God, there's everything for grandma's great parsnip soup, you can walk in and we'll be like, yo, make the parsnip soup. That sounds delicious, right? And then we move a bunch of stuff over and create a big tented in area at the park. We have a second crew that goes and does that. And then at 6:30, we serve our meal. And everyone is invited to share. You can bring to-go containers because it's getting cold out. We don't expect people to stay in a snowbank with us, though we invite you to. You can grab stuff and go, or you could be an awesome ambassador and actually do the work of Food Not Bombs by taking food and bringing it to people who aren't eating enough, who don't have the right quality of food, or maybe just need a dose of veggies once a week, right? There's a lot of folks who live in mission or live in shelter programs in the city who joke with me all the time where it's like they take shits on Tuesday because they eat vegetables on Monday, right? So whether it's your once a week or whether, it's any other thing. And then after people eat the meal, we invite people back to the church to go and do dishes. There's all kinds of other ways to get involved as well. We do our donation pickups every Saturday from the farmers market. So that's how Food Not Bombs resources its food primarily. Although we get stuff from people who are just in the community who are emptying out their cupboards, or maybe somebody passes away and they've got a pantry for us or something like that. Most of the donations that we work with and most of the food that we provide is incredibly seasonal, totally delicious, and made from the labor and toil and soil of local farmers. So we go to the farmers market every Saturday. We go around to all the booths and say, hey, is there anything that you have left over kicking around for Food Not Bombs? And we get stuff that's like bunged up and bruised or something that's just not going to sell for the next week. And in all honesty, a lot of the farmers are just delirious and delightful and give us things because they love the project and because the people who grow food know that closing that loop is so crucial, right? People who spend all of their time growing food do not want to see it wasted. And so we live in a culture where hunger is rampant and it's completely unnecessary, and it has everything to do with not sharing the resources. And so this is one way to share the resources. And so if you're not available on Monday, we can always get your help on a Saturday picking up groceries, or we need people postering, telling people about things. You can come and get involved with canning or catering and some of the things that I do. And otherwise, we are always looking for people to help us understand how to build this movement, right? Because that's very much what it is. It's a very fluid, open movement. And we're less of a collective and more of like a collaborative force of people who come together as autonomous beings, but with a vision and a basis of unity in mind. And we always welcome expansion of what that vision could bring us.
That's amazing. Okay, we got to wrap this up. I got 15 minutes to do this. Thank you so much, Rochelle.
Thanks,
I
Matt.
hope everybody pays attention to this. It's a very, very important part of our community. Okay.
Peterborough.org.
Be well.